I'm going to talk about rifle actions. There's a considerable amount of misconception, I believe, brought out almost entirely by the individuals that don't know how to build a rifle on anything but a Remington 700 or one of the custom actions that are designed around the Remington 700 footprint. It's really sad that we've got individuals out here that have absolutely no idea in the world how to barrel an action unless it's one of these actions. And it should be very obvious that it isn't any more difficult to barrel one of many dozens of different actions other than these Remington 700 footprint actions. Basically, what we've got here is people that don't have an ability to go hardly any further. Evidently, they've taken a little short course somewhere, perhaps not even that, to be able to thread, fit, and chamber a barrel to an action and properly chamber it, headspace it, and so forth. I started building rifles around almost all of our early Mauser 98s, 1914, 1917 Enfields, 03 Springfields, 03 A3 Springfields. And over the years, built rifles on just about everything that there is. There's a lot of different Mauser actions. We have the Weatherby actions. We have the Winchester Model 70 actions. Various different eras of the Winchester Model 70 actions. Both claw feed and push feed style actions. These actions aren't any different to barrel than any other action. But part of this is a huge misconception that the rifle isn't going to be an accurate rifle if it isn't built around one of these actions. And we've had just literally dozens of different action makers crop up over the past, say, 20 years or so, especially the last maybe 5 or 6 years, and everything is designed around the 700 Remington footprint to basically go in a 700 stock. Well, this opens up a whole nother area. You know, we have situations here where we've got stock makers that are making fiberglass stocks, and some of these people, likewise, they can't make anything unless it's for a Remington 700. I build rifles on just about every action that there is. Just about everything that has come down the line in the past 100 and some odd years. Now I can state here that I can build just as accurate a rifle on a Winchester Model 70 pre-64 action, properly trued up, the receiver face trued, the bolt face trued, make sure the lugs have complete contact, lap lugs. This is not any different approach than it is some of these other situations. And this opens up another aspect to do with these just simple 700 Remington actions. these actions, because the way that they've been manufactured, the way that they're made, they've had to be trued. The thread needs to be trued, the receiver face needs to be trued, the bolt lugs need to be trued, and so forth, and perhaps the bolt face needs to be trued to everything else. And we likewise don't have hardly anybody out here that has a clue to single point a thread on your lathe to true the thread on a 700 action. I've done a video on this basically before stated. So everybody thinks that because the 700 Remington has to be trued, that just about everything else, according to my correspondence, everybody thinks that the action has to be trued. Well, the first thing is, our current manufactured type actions are made on very, very precision machinery. And the greatest share of these actions, even on these factory rifles, the action as it comes before the rifle's built, the action is true already. People ask about, having a Sako action, using a Sako action and truing it. Well, the action's already true. The likelihood is that, from my experience building rifles on just about every era of Sako action, that they're true. It's pretty simple to see if it's true. The depth of micrometer put to the bolt face and the receiver face of the action around the bolt face to see if it's true. And invariably when I check these things, these actions are true within a tenth of a thousandth or so. Well, you can't machine anything closer than about a 1/10,000th of an inch. So they're true. And even our early actions, our Mauser actions, our Enfield actions, our Springfield actions, the receivers were threaded true. This brings up something to do with the threads. We've got, our basic thread, which is a V thread. And anyway, we've got some other actions that have a square thread. Well, nobody seems to be able to cut a square thread. Well, it's not any more difficult to thread a barrel for an action that has a square thread than it is a V thread. The procedures are all still the same. What we've got here is a tremendous amount of inexperience. I've always got somebody asking me if I'll build a rifle on a Mauser or an Enfield or whatever it might happen to be, or a Weatherby action or whatnot. And I build rifles on all these things. I've had a customer for a lot of 20 some odd years, probably 25 years. Guy's around 90 some odd years old at this point in time. Can't do very much. A very, very active hunter, very, very active shooter in his earlier years. And yeah, he has various different rifles. He has a rifle or two, a Remington 700 or Winchester Model 70s. I built him 1,000-yard rifles, on Winchester Model 70, Remington 700. And I can tell you right now that the man was a very, very, very capable shot, shooting in the 1,000-yard match, and pretty damn often winning in 1,000-yard matches with a Winchester Model 70 pre-64 action that I trued and barreled with a Hart barrel. All these things are about details. details, everything being true. And we've talked about lock time, the actual time that it takes from the time that trigger breaks till the firing pin falls and hits the primer. The actual lock time, the firing time, the milliseconds that it takes for that firing pin to fall. It's pretty immaterial, I have determined in my lifetime of building rifles. If lock time is so damn important, how is it that the Model 70 was chosen for many, many, many years as an action for long-range target type shooting? You know, whether it's 600 yards or 1,000 yards. Because of the design of the action, it's got a square bottom on it. It can't torque in a stock that's properly bedded, whereas the round action can. Relying totally on other aspects, you know, to keep that everything true when the bullet engages the rifling, the twist of the barrel to torque it this way or to torque it that way. This older fellow that I'm talking about, he told me many times of shooting groups at 1,000 yards with a 300 Winchester Magnum that I built him. I actually put 2 different barrels on that rifle over time because he basically shot one out. He hasn't shot the other one out, but age has caught up with him. Talking about shooting inch and 3/4, inch and 7/8 inch groups at 1,000 yards and having a perfect score. What it means by a perfect score is that group is centered. That group is centered. They're all tens. This is the kind of capability that is possible. It's the way that the rifle's built. It has to do with the builder that built the rifle and his knowledge and his ability to build an accurate rifle and pay attention to every detail. Early years, this was one of the main actions that was used. It was a Winchester Model 70. Even Mauser 98, good Mauser 98s, Mauser F-end actions, Belgium actions. Everything trued. You see, everything done right. If you've got a perfectly centered chamber, perfectly trued action, everything's right, a good straight barrel without any damn bow in it, that's been drilled, reamed, and rifled straight, that's free of stress, and this brings up, you know, basically another aspect to do with this accuracy situation, to do with stresses. And at this point in time, most of the barrel makers understand and fully and properly stress relieve their barrels. I'm not saying that everybody does, because this is not the case. Stress relieved from a heat treat standpoint, stress relieved from a deep freeze standpoint, perhaps both done to a barrel. And there are a lot of aspects here. As far as rifle actions go, I can build a rifle on just about any suitable action. If the action is strong enough, will handle the cartridge, and so forth. If it's feasible, entirely feasible, I build rifles around these situations. And I have for my entire gun building career. And I don't know why exactly we haven't had somebody come along and manufacture a completely control round, long Mauser type claw extractor action designed around the best situation, which is the Winchester Model 70, which is a copy of the Mauser 98 and FN Mausers. You know, we had at one point in time quite a supply of these military actions and so forth. We at one time had Sako supply actions in 3 different sizes, you know, and this basically dried up. That really put a crimp on rifle building, because Sako actions have always been wonderful actions, wonderfully machined, and if they could build Sako actions, you know, the way that they did years ago, the early actions, the 461, the 579, and the 61 numbered actions. These actions were wonderful actions. You didn't have to throw anything up on one of those actions. They were built a lot of years ago. Things were done right. Along the line, we've had various people come up with a few things, you know, that basically were trying to copy the Winchester Model 70. Montana Rifle Company at one time was making, now out of business, was making an action that was designed considerably around the Winchester Model 70. Investment cast actions that were basically machined afterwards, trued up or whatnot. And I built rifles around those actions at different points in time. Some of the quality was there, and sometimes the quality wasn't. And I have encountered actions over the years that the actual some of these Mauser type actions, these may be a copy of the Winchester Model 70 action, that actually the thread itself wasn't true. And it's very hard to set up an action and true the action unless it's a round action to be able to go in a lathe. It's very hard to set up after the fact. For instance, one of these actions that have a round top and square sides and a square bottom, very hard to set that up to be able to true a thread. You discover that you've got one of these actions that's got a thread that's crooked. I encountered this here just in the past month or so, an action that I determined that the thread wasn't true on. Waste of time. You got something like that, you abandon it. Don't slough it off on somebody else so that they've got the problem. Choose a decent action. And one of the actions to basically come along, one of the latest ones to come along, is the action that I now use to build rifles on, and this is the Terminus action, made by Terminus in Pennsylvania. This is a three lug bolt. So you've got a short bolt lift. The action works very, very smoothly. Very, very, very high quality action. Nothing gets any more high quality than some of these latest actions. And anyway, I hope that I'm trying to answer some of these aspects, because I'm one of the few guys that's been there, and I'm still there building rifles. You know, there's points in time over a year that I've got, you know, dozens of these Model 70s or Mausers or Enfields, you know, in the house here that I'm building rifles around. And most of these, of course, they're hunting rifles, but I'm reiterating that we can use some of these actions just as well as one of these Remington 700 style actions for long range precision target shooting. without any difficulty whatsoever. Everything works fine. And it's all the details, and I've talked about this before. Good barrels, true actions, a good trigger that breaks exactly the same every time. That's very clean in its surface, and all these details. A very, very good quality scope that's free of any optical problems. That doesn't have a parallax problem. You know, I've talked about shooting at longer range and one thing another with various situations. You know, I've actually used one of the most inexpensive scopes at the time, you know, from Bushnell to shoot with a rifle that I built, you know, a Bushnell Banner 6-18 scope, shooting a group that measures an actual 510 thousandths at 520 yards. You see? So there's a lot of details here. I'm throwing in the scope detail because it's still part of the rifle build. And I worked with the scope and I messed with the scope for 10 or 15 minutes of an early morning before I shot. And I determined that I had it absolutely, got a parallax adjustment. I had it turned down a little bit in power, down to like 15 power. And I worked the parallax adjustment till I had it absolutely parallax free. This is how I shot, part of how I shot in a perfect condition, that type of a group at that distance. It's all about details, all these fine details. But all these details compounded, all added up, if there's something along the line that's not right. I've had actions that the bolt would bind, you know, in the action, because the bolt bore, when you work the bolt bore wasn't true. It basically had two different positions. And when you opened up the bolt on a fired case, the bolt would bind a little bit, because the actual bore in the receiver for the bolt was not true. There was two different locations for that bolt to basically, and it was, the bolt would get confused of where, you know, in position, and cause just a little bit of cramp, a little bit of bind, and one thing another. You know, these are details. Everything was fine when the bolt was totally shut, and everything was lined up perfectly. But when you open the bolt, when you lifted the bolt up, just about all the way up, things changed, because things started running out of concentric. Well, I'm talking about details here. There's lots and lots and lots of details. And the only way that you learn these things is that you live them. You do them every day. Figure these things out. You know, just talked about a bolt not, you know, right in the action. Rifle barrels that are not totally stress-free. Rifle barrels that have somewhat of a bow in the bore, that they're not straight, and one thing another. So anyway, you know, this gives an idea. I'm giving you an idea here, giving you the truth, that this is how this all works. Everything's got to be just right. It's got to be perfect. And then, of course, I've talked about reloading and one thing another. And the close velocity, you just can't whip up a load with precision cases, precision bullets, such and such powder, such and such primer, a match primer, and expect that you're going to have automatic match accuracy. You have to have tight velocity variations to get velocity and not velocity but accuracy, down at the target. So these are the details of the whole thing to do with a rifle build.